My best friend's wedding was a complete disaster, and somehow I ended up in the middle of it all. I have been friends with Dana since kindergarten. We were inseparable, we even shared a boyfriend, if that's what you can call holding hands on a playground at 6 years old. We would get into fights and not talk for years, then one day see each other, and it was like it never happened. I spent an entire summer at her house because I didn't want to go home and neither of our parents cared. Dana and I have lived together, fallen out, became closer than sisters and as distant as strangers, but at this time we were close. Dana had met Glenn when we were living together. It wasn't a great living arrangement, but we were both desperate. We were living in a one-bedroom apartment. She lived in the laundry room, big enough for the washing machine and dryer, and squeezed in twin-sized bed. I had constructed an extra room for myself out of the large living room and some plywood/padding. My uncle, who is fully disabled, lived in the only real room. We were in the process of getting him disability. Took years, but we finally won. So, her infant daughter lived in my room with me, and Dana only slept in her room at night. Glenn helped her move into an apartment and raise her daughter. He was much older than her but seemed to be good for her. They had some major issues with how he treated her, and he was verbally abusive. They tended to be very on again, off again. I told her several times that they are better off not together and that she needed to get her shit together for her daughter. She always went back. We had a big fight and stopped talking for a few years. We met up on accident during a Black Friday event, and it was like it had never happened. We got super close again, and at this time I was with my now husband. Everything was good for a few years between us. We hung out all the time. She moved in under my apartment and we were inseparable again. I got married and she was a bridesmaid. She finally wore Glenn down and he agreed to marry her. We got to planning right away. To explain the type of income we are making, I must explain we live in a rural area and we're renting old WW2 barracks. I still live here for now. Our weddings had a limit of maybe 1,000 to 1,500 budgets, and that was mostly DIY. Dana had to go to a major city 4 hours away every weekend for wedding stuff. I drove because she is an awful driver. She is awful to her parents and demands they give her money even though they are also struggling. Her grandma, who sadly has passed away, would get screamed at over the phone because she needed more money. Her wedding dress was donated by a lady who she used to live next to as a child. Dana wanted this extremely elaborate wedding at a wedding barn near us. 10,000 plus, but Glenn told her not a chance. She tried to convince him to take out a loan to pay for it, and he refused. Her parents got the brunt end of this. They lived about 5 hours away at this time. Now let's get to the wedding I have dubbed the never-ending wedding. It is important for context that I, at the time of planning and execution of this wedding, was working graveyard. I would skip days of sleep to drive her 4 hours and back, then go to work. I would get phone calls about her wedding and the planning if I wasn't home to listen to her complain about not having the money for her wants. Her parents were buying the food for the wedding, which was kind of them. Her mom went to Safeway and pre-ordered fried and grilled chicken, hotel pans, and pounds of sides. Dana complained that she wanted prime rib, but eventually got told to deal with it. I asked her who she was going to have as her maid of honor, and she informed me that since her friend Dolly was the maid of honor at her last wedding, she wanted her to be the maid of honor at this one. Not going to lie, I was upset, but I got over it. We all had to pay for our own dresses. This entire wedding was 3 months from start to event, so we had to get our dresses off of the rack. She wanted short red strapless dresses. I looked horrible. I'm a bigger girl, so the dress off the rack fit me horribly. She loved it, so I bought it. The venue they ended up with was the same venue I chose due to cost. They charged $150 for the entire day, but since it was a Grange Hall, it was a dry venue. This is important for later. I arrived at the venue with Dana skipping sleep so I could set up her wedding. She was only there for about 15 to 20 minutes. I put up the decor and met the DJ, a professional who did it for free because they are friends, and his wife, who I later became friends with. She did not give them directions or a list. She told them to play what feels appropriate. I arranged the building to receive guests and coordinated with the venue owner. I went home, slept for 3 hours, and went to work. I got off at 7 a.m. and agreed to go to the pre-wedding pedicures at 10 a.m. The wedding was at 5 p.m. We get to the event and she starts complaining that the food wasn't there yet. We had hours till the event was happening. The men show up about 1 hour before the event was to start. Hammered. Blackout drunk hammered. The groomsmen were barely put together and the one I walked with had half of his shirt hanging out of his pants. The groom told me that he had been drinking since this morning and the bride's father brought a handle of Jack. I reminded everyone that it was a dry venue and they can't bring alcohol in. I was told that it was a little too late for that. I had not been upstairs. The building had an upstairs and a downstairs. Upstairs was the ceremony and downstairs was the reception because it had a little kitchen. It was also where the women were getting ready. I went into the ceremony area and everyone, packed house because she had a lot of family, had a beer in their hands or a bottle next to them. I went to Dana and told her she would be kicked out of the venue and she told me to calm down and get ready. By the time the wedding was supposed to start, Dana was still not ready and the men were outside still pulling on the bottles. I quickly got Dana put together and went outside to wrestle up the guys. Took me at least 10 more minutes before I had the men in place to walk the aisle. We finally start making our way out and I can't really remember the wedding part because I was so annoyed. The photos of the wedding showed all of us looking irritated and the men looking extremely drunk. Finally, the wedding was over and we went outside for photos. Dolly did not do a single thing for this wedding. She lived in a different state and had to fly up for the wedding. Explained to me why no one told the guests to go downstairs for food. The photos took forever and her grandfather did them for free. We came in and half the guests were milling around the venue and the other half had left. I informed everyone that the food was downstairs and they could join us there. I get everyone downstairs, run upstairs for my phone, and when I came back everyone was headed upstairs with no food. I asked what was going on and they said that Dolly told everyone to go back upstairs for cake cutting and dances. I get upstairs and we do the cake cutting. Glenn shoved cake in Dana's face, stopped doing that, and she was pissed. More people left. We went downstairs to eat after the dances and there was like 10 people left. The DJ went to the bar that the after party was supposed to be at and was setting up karaoke. We packed up the food and put it in the fridge that was in the building. All of the reception took about 3 hours. We get to the bar. I knew the night was going to be shitty, so the first thing I did was go to the bar and have them line me up 4 shots of Jameson, the only thing I got to drink that night. Before the DJ could put karaoke on, the groom had gotten into a fight. I calmed it down and we all got kicked out. We decided to go to another bar in town where it only got worse. While we were there, one of the groomsmen spit on the floor. The staff saw it and were going to bounce him. He was already hammered and I knew this would cause a fight. I knew the bouncer and asked him to let me get the guy out of the bar. GM told me he wasn't going to leave until his beer was gone. I compromised by telling him I would buy him a new beer somewhere else. As GM was handing me his beer, the bouncer reached over my shoulder and took the beer. The next thing over my shoulder was GM's fist and it parked itself directly into bouncer's face. The bar erupted. People were punching each other and my only thought was to get GM and Glenn out of the bar. I grabbed them by the waist and started pushing them to the doorway. The doorway was at the end of very steep stairs. There was a plywood door next to me as I held onto the door frame with my fingertips. As I am standing there pushing them out of the door, the bartender punches me in the back of the head. She hit me hard enough to stun me. I turned around and pushed her through the plywood door. I looked at Glenn and told him I got punched in the head and if he didn't want to deal with my husband, he better get the fuck up the stairs. My husband had to work the next morning, so he was unable to make it to the wedding. He is a very large/strong man who's extremely protective over me. Glenn and GM ran up the stairs. I opened up the doorway and the rest of the wedding followed out to the street. All of the men that were in the altercation jumped in a truck and they hauled ass. They ended up getting stopped but sent home by the police after the bar staff didn't press charges. I talked to the police and had my friend drive me home. Me and Dana are still Facebook friends and I love her children, but we are no longer close friends. It was not because of this incident, but many more. They are divorced now. Edit. I only told the people to go downstairs because Dana came to me in tears about how Dolly hasn't done anything and was supposed to have everyone go downstairs. She asked me to make the announcement. The men had gone back to the cars to drink and smoke. She begged me to go outside and make them come back in for the cake and dancing. I at that time was tired and asked someone to help me get the men inside. None of this was my problem, and I was young with no boundaries. Commenter. You and your friends show some remarkable decision-making throughout this story. Having your friend's baby sleep in your room while the mom sleeps elsewhere makes very little sense. Skipping sleep to drive her around the world. Not discouraging your best friend from being with an abusive partner. Pointing yourself the chief wrangler and booze police for no reason. Where was the bride in all this? I absolutely cannot follow the actual wedding part of this story. Plus all the ridiculousness of the stupid drunks being stupid drunks. Where the heck were all the women except you? I am also very confused about why your husband couldn't go to a 5 p.m. wedding because he had to work the next day. You had 4 shots and were punched in the head and still somehow cast yourself as a sober heroine in this story. I hope things are going better for everyone now. Up reply. The kid slept in my room because her bed didn't fit in the small room her mom was in. I didn't want her to get kicked out of the venue, and the guy showed up randomly at my wedding to make sure we were not drinking. I have no idea why he didn't show up to theirs other than mine was a morning one maybe? The bride was yelling at us to fix everything. I didn't want to be appointed, but by this time I had no boundaries or techniques to say no. Most of the other women were trying to calm Dana or ignoring her, which is usually the safest way. I in no way am a heroine in this story. I was an asshole the whole time. It was just a horrible, crazy experience. My husband just got back from work and corrected me. He did go to the wedding but did not go out with us. I think we are way better off now. We are both in pretty good places.